Okay, folks, so this is my second entry, and with any luck, it'll be better edited. Um, this should have at the end of it a tag that labels it as part of my website, and an entry into that campaign world. Specifically, this should be the entry for Pantheros, which is a small island in between two continents, um, specifically Azurland and Adenland. Hopefully I'll be able to put up a picture of Pantheros here, and maybe Adenland here, and it'll actually work. If it doesn't, I'm sorry. It's on the website. I'd like to talk a little bit about the history of the campaign world, a little bit about this island in particular. I'm starting with Pantheros because it is, first of all, named Pantheros because it's the home of just about every pantheon. Essentially, what has happened is that humans in this campaign world had one pantheon that they worshipped almost exclusively. But they have at this point not spread themselves around the world. They have not taken up new ways of being, new civilizations, that sort of thing. This is just basically the beginning of their history. In fact, all occurs pretty much at a time and place called the time of unmarked years. Because they don't have an idea of time in that sense. Everything's sort of cyclical, everything runs with the moons. They don't have an idea of marking time. And the elves haven't really developed one either, because at this point they're pretty much living thousands of years at any given time, and they don't have a reason to mark years in the very sense of just marking cycles of the moon or any of that, because there's no point. What happens is they find their way to worshiping anything that's larger than to them in a given area. They end up worshiping hill giants, storm giants, whatever the case may be, sometimes powerful ancestors. It's very tribe-oriented, very clan-oriented. At some point, they start worshiping the god Azor, Azorus. He is originally a storm giant. He leads them to victories in battle, and in a very sort of Viking way, he operates like an Odin or a Thor type character who raises himself to godhood. Probably the first real human worship god. In time, humans are introduced to elves for a whole nother reason that I'll go into another time. The effect of which is that humans find themselves able to actually understand magic, actually understand boat building, exploration, all these various things, and they find themselves going from continent to continent. Well, where their storm giants are probably the most powerful creatures that they have run into at the time, they find themselves running into hordes of dragons, trolls, all kinds of things that exist on other continents. The effect of which is that suddenly you have a northern pantheon and a southern pantheon that overlap each other. You have a god of wisdom in one pantheon and a god of wisdom in another, and a god of magic in one and a god of magic in another. And as we all know, in campaign settings, when you have two gods of one thing, there tends to be conflict and all hell breaks loose. This was no exception. The pantheons started finding themselves coming closer and closer to war, but a miraculous thing happened. The gods of wisdom, specifically Bandor and Abraxas, one being a dragon and one being a human, or I should say of a giant origin who was born a god, lucky bastard, decided that rather than get into a gigantic war that may very well destroy all the pantheons and leave them with very few followers, decided instead to come together and make deals, strictly put out domains, assign sections of land if they needed to, all kinds of things, and be bound by this. And the deal worked. The funny thing was that at the same time, we had elves who have their own gods, dwarves who have their own gods, gnomes, halflings who have their god. And the situation arose where the elves did not like the idea of being left out of this deal, did not like the idea that a pantheon was being created that had many gods, all very powerful, part of an expanding race that was quickly overpopulating the planet, and may very well someday outpower them. Corlon in particular was not about to potentially have to face a united front without having some sort of backup. To that end, he decided that the best way to assure that his domains were left untouched, that elves were left untouched, and their ways of worship, was to become part of the deal. So he included himself, presided over to some extent the creation of the compact, and made sure that his domains were left untouched, particularly the domains related to elves, elven high magic, that sort of thing, and moored into the same thing for the dwarves. So at the end of this, just about everyone had jumped on board, and this compact was created. And now it was actually sealed in stone. Pantheros is an island that is directly in between both of these continents, and was raised for this specific purpose. Right out of the depths. They brought it up, put the stone in the center. It's a very large stone. It's known as the compact stone, the great compact stone, the contract stone, however you want to call it. And it's written in divine languages that are quite difficult for anybody to translate and understand. And in it, all the rules that the gods are bound by are written, and they all mark it with their various symbols. What's interesting about this is by creating this compact stone, all of them became bound by it. They also bound all future generations of deities. So any deity that is born afterwards, or created afterwards, or raised afterwards, however you want to look at it, is bound by this compact on this prime material plane. Which can cause conflict, I'm sure, between various deities, but for the most part, they're all bound to it. When somebody becomes a god, their symbol automatically appears on it, so it's a good way to understand who has actually been raised to godhood, who has been pulled away from godhood, who is a perished deity, who isn't, and so forth. Of course, the stone itself drew in a lot of pilgrims. A lot of pilgrims came to see their deity symbol on the stone. The effect of which is that the island itself is home to a very large city known as Pantheros, and it houses a clergy of some sort, in case of druids, I guess a druid's grove. It houses a church, synagogue, whatever you want to call it, temple of some sort for every deity in existence. And it's just about in every deity's best interest that everyone who worships them at some point make a pilgrimage there. So the city is quite large, expands during the summer seasons when pilgrimages become easier. You can find, it's this world's Waterdeep, so to speak. Everyone can go there, everyone has access. You'll find just about anything there. The other thing is that the stone itself has anchored a mythal to it that keeps violence between the various factions of various deities, from attacking one another. Essentially, there's a giant non-violent pact that is attached to this mythal. It makes it very difficult to commit a crime, makes it very difficult to hurt one another for religious purposes, that sort of thing. So every deity finds haven here, finds the ability to raise followers, raise armies if they have to. It's pretty much a central hub. There's very large temple districts, several in fact, usually dedicated to either a single deity or a single pantheon. For instance, the northern pantheon will find itself in the oldest parts of the city, in the center. There's an elven secluded area where only elves are allowed to go, that's dedicated to Corlon and Sahim. There's of course the same for Moradin, although his tends to be nothing but forges. And that's pretty much the history of Pantheros. Some of the sites are simple, obviously. There's temples of just about every sort. There's a bustling market district, a huge harbor, and the whole city pretty much runs off of fish. So there is an extensive fishing industry that crosses the ports between Azuris and Edenland. The whole place tends to be protected by the Rangers of the North. It's a group that travels the northern coast of Edenland. They protect Pantheros, and they're highly paid to do so. Other than that, there's not much else to say at the moment, except that it's a fun place to start a campaign, although I think some of my players might disagree. This will hopefully go into the Pantheros section, and if anybody has any questions, they can take a look and see some of the history, see what they're looking for, and hopefully it'll work out. Signing out.